Hello, Zero Books readers. In this video, we'll eventually take a look at David Lynch's classic television series, Twin Peaks, as an example of the idea of the world without us, or as an example of an object for itself, as described by Graham Harman in his book, Speculative Realism, and by Eugene Thacker in his book, In the Dust of This Planet. To start with, let's take a look at Eugene Thacker's notion of a planet. For Thacker, a planet is something a little bit different than what astronomers describe. What's important for him about a planet isn't its orbit or its size or whether it's visible to the naked eye, but rather where the idea of planet stands in relation to two other notions. That is, the planet is part of a triad that also includes the world and the Earth.
We also live in a time in which events at the micro level are also events at the macro level. The increasing frequency of global pandemics, new biopolitical modes of production, and the prevalence of natural disasters are events that are at once local and global, molecular and planetary. While human beings or human groups are obviously involved in such events, there is also a sense in which such events are beyond human comprehension. In short, life is a human-centered affair, and yet it is unhuman-oriented.
Taking his cue from radical ecology, Thacker suggests that the greatest challenge that philosophy faces today lies in comprehending the world in which we live as both a human and a non-human world. He calls this a philosophical problem because no matter how much we attempt to care about the penguins, the antelope, and the amoeba Naegleria fowleri, we humans, and especially Western humans, have rather narcissistically developed ways of thinking that puts ourselves at the center. According to Thacker, this isn't just a problem in philosophy. Mythological thinkers, religious thinkers, as well as modern philosophers like Sartre and Camus have all tended to approach the world as if it were for us, even as some admit that we don't know what to do with it. As a solution for our narcissism, Thacker suggests that we consider that there are three interpretations of the world. There's the world as it is for us, but there's also the Earth, that is, there's a world as an object, and finally, there's the world as a planet. The world, when thought of as a planet, is a world not for us, but a world without us. Thacker writes, using advanced predictive models, we have even imagined what would happen to the world if we as human beings were to become extinct. So, while we can never experience the world in itself as an object, we seem to be almost fatalistically drawn to imagine the world without us. If we want to imagine what this world without us might consist of, we should turn to Graham Harman, tackling the same philosophical problem from the perspective not of a cultural critic, but as a philosopher. Harman notices that attempts to imagine the world without us can be reframed as attempts to understand any object as it is independently. That is, the difficulty of imagining the world without us can be reduced to an attempt to understand any given thing outside of its relations. And while Thacker posits the world without us as a fantastic and possibly illusory nightmare that haunts humanity, Harman argues that objects on their own, objects that are not ultimately objects within our subjectivity, but exist for themselves and in themselves alone, are not illusory, but necessary. The name for an object that exists without relating, exists without perceiving, is a sleeping entity, or a dormant object. Dormant objects are real, but currently without psyche.
Some of your friends are real.
But the truly weird suggestion from Harman is that these dormant objects without psyches and without relations are immanent. that is, the world that we might want to claim to know, consists of objects and places that are unknowable.
Hello, I stand buffer.
Put another way, the world without us is already here. What is the meaning of the Red Room or the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks? What can we take away from it?
I got good news. That the mule wash is going to come back in style.
The first thing to understand is that it cannot be read at the level of content. For instance, when Laura Palmer appears to Agent Cooper, what's important about her is not that she's Laura Palmer, but how she denies and eludes Cooper's attempt to recognize her as Laura Palmer.
I felt like but sometimes my arms went.
She's filled with features.
In his book, Towards a Speculative Realism, Harman says that while his realism, quote, might sound like a strange panpsychist alternative to the scientific worldview, it is not. He says the panpsychist view is that anything that exists must also perceive. But the view that Harman has is that anything that relates must perceive. For Harman, then, the ultimate object is the totality of objects, the universe of objects itself. And while we can never know that object through our relations to it, we can speculate about it. Again, to understand the world without us, to see the ultimate object that relates to nothing outside of itself, can't be accomplished directly. We can only relate with this or that distortion of an object, for all relations are distortions. Agent Cooper cannot understand what happens to him or what people say to him while he's in the Red Room. But he might be able to comprehend what the Red Room is overall, or how it's structured. When Harman explains the genius of H.P. Lovecraft's writing, when he praises H.P. Lovecraft's descriptions, especially of monsters, he says that there is a clean separation between the multiple facets of the thing and whatever organizing principle is able to hold those different things together. The miracle of Lovecraft's distinction is that by separating the facets of the thing and the outer world, the organizing principle becomes apparent. And the same can be said of the sequences within Lynch's Red Room. To understand the Red Room, we don't look at what makes sense, but rather look for what sense there is in the senselessness. We don't look for meaning, but for the meaning of the arbitrary. We don't try to separate the signal from the noise, but ask what noise itself signifies or signals. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons help to make sure that Sublation Media can continue to provide interviews, videos, books, and articles that are critical of the left from the left. If you are tired of remaining stuck within bourgeois ideologies and politics, help us sublate them both.